Right, everybody, welcome back to Newsroom Live. We're going to give you another look at the images that the FBI, Tucson area authorities have released in the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. This is the person they are trying to talk to. This is a major break in this case. And to continue our discussion on our top story, we want to bring in retired Lieutenant Commander of the NYPD, Ralph Cilento. Ralph, thank you so much for being with us. I'm just going to go right in. You know investigations, you know all of this well. When a break like this, in a case such as this happens, walk us through what the police procedure is.
Well, one of the first things they do is they parse out the video very, very slowly. So there are a number of things that we could try to assess from the video. And trust me, they're doing it all. But what they're doing initially is pulling apart the clothing. What backpack is he wearing? What sneakers is he wearing? What clothes is he wearing? Does anybody recognize his jacket? Does anybody recognize his gait, the way he walks, right? You'll recall in the Charlie Kirk assassination, it was it was the assassin's parents that noticed the gait and the walk of the shooter that said, hey, I think I identify that as my son. So they're parsing out everything about the video, the way he walks, the way he looks, his mannerisms, what kind of backpack is he wearing, what kind of jacket is he wearing. The hope is that somebody will recognize the jacket. It appears to me, at least at a glance, that he's wearing ordinary surgical gloves, what happened to those gloves. And it's very, very valuable to put this information out into the media so that everyone in the Tucson area can get a look at this person.
Ralph, let me ask you this. We were trying to, as we were watching the images before the video part of it came in, and we were looking at it, and they look like surgical gloves. Vinny, can you also just roll that while Ralph's talking? They look like surgical gloves because we were wondering, we know it's certainly not cold in that area like it is to us, but yeah,
Right.
the gloves, we didn't know if they were like boxing gloves or regular leather gloves, but they look like surgical to you?
Well, it looks like surgical to me. The
Okay.
only thing that gives me a doubt about that is when he gets really, really close to the camera. Uh, they might look like a different kind, but
Okay.
when he's pulled further away from the camera, to me they look like surgical gloves.
Got it. We were just discussing, and we certainly know, as you know well, we're all just looking at it now for the very first time. So, okay, so they're going through things, trying to do the clothing, trying to do the backpack and that sort of thing right there.
Right.
Let me ask you this, in regards to this situation now, when you have this happen in a break like this, do you keep the family? There's been discussions as far as the lack of contact from the abductors, the believed abductors, and the
Mhm.
family. Just how do you interpret that? Is that normal, or there's been some speculation that normally the family, or at least law enforcement, should have perhaps heard from the captors a little bit more often than what they have, which we believe right now has only been these alleged ransom notes.
Right. Well, Antoine, nothing about this case is normal. The way ordinary kidnapping and ransom cases work, this is not normal. We're assuming that those contacts from the so-called abductors are even legitimate, right? I don't think anybody's really sure about that. Just based on what I'm listening to, this is going on as an ancillary subject that they're working on, right? And at the same time, we don't really know if we've had any legitimate contact from a kidnapper. We think we have,
Hmm.
but we go back to these Bitcoin accounts, which is not active. So there's been nothing about this case that is normal as far as the kidnapping goes. And here's how I can land my plane and prove it to you. If somebody really wants to kidnap and hold for ransom, what are your two motivations for kidnapping? Is revenge or profit? Okay. And now, if somebody really wants to profit from a kidnapping, why would you reach out to TMZ? Why would you reach out to the idea in a kidnapping, in a ransom kidnapping, is to keep it quiet. It's to keep it quiet. You want to get this money and not have it released to the media at all, which only plays to me that this is a red herring.
A red herring, absolutely. Let me ask you this: the would video show the video if you would, Vinny, because I want to make sure that Ralph is looking at it as well. Ralph, this dismantling a camera, to what degree of sophistication would you call this type, as you've looked at the video and say, a lot of times we say, oh, this was a dumb criminal or along the
Mhm.
lines, like that. But to remove the camera, to wear gloves, just how do you interpret this? Just off the offset, in the 20 minutes or so you've had to look at this.
Right. So there's all this action with a bush, right? With a branch where he's covering up that doesn't seem very sophisticated to me. It just doesn't. Okay. And if someone is going to come with the intent to do this, you'd think it would be a little better planned out. It
Hmm.
looks like he's lost in the front of the house. He's not really sure what he's looking for. And he pulls up a bush. I'm not really sure what the actions he was trying to do with the branch, maybe cover the camera. So in my early viewing of this, it doesn't look like it's that sophisticated. And if you're going to go there to do a kidnapping, you think there'd be better planning. On the other hand, we don't know who he is yet. So whatever
Hmm.
he did, he must be doing it right, right? But the wearing of the gloves doesn't take a criminal genius to do that. But I was very put off by the fact that he's trying to cover up the camera with a bush, right? You weren't more prepared than that to do a kidnapping, that you're trying to cover up the camera with a bush. Unless I'm viewing it incorrectly, that's what it looks like he's doing to me.
No, I think we're all looking at it at the same time and in the same way as far as processing it and trying to see what exactly it entails to the degree to what you were saying. But one of the other things that we wanted to know and to ask about in regards to this case, while we have your ear, Ralph, is this in the search for the suspect. And just if you would elaborate, because we know that Arizona, there's been concerns about its proximity geographically,
Mhm.
to the south, to the border, to you, if you will, as well as to possible other states. Can you just talk about the importance of that particular aspect from a law enforcement trying to solve a case perspective?
Well, when a state like, I mean, this is just circumstantial. It happens to be Arizona,
Right.
which is close to the border. There's no other way to describe that except for inconvenient, right? That is an inconvenient parameter of this search that you have to deal with. There's no way around that. Having said that, now that you have these images, my recommendation for this would be what they're doing, which is a full court media press. Get it out as far and as wide as you can. Somebody knows this person. Somebody knows this person. Even if they don't know where Miss Guthrie is, they know someone knows this person. And they could see the way they move and act, the jacket, the backpack. Somebody knows this person. So the idea is to get it out as far and as wide as you can into the media. Get as many civilian eyes on these images as you can. There's no downside to it. You don't have the woman now. You don't have her. You don't have a suspect. What is the possible harm in getting these photos out as far and wide as you can?
We also, as we're looking at the pictures, the still photos now from the Nest Cam, the mask, the face mask,
Right.
is also on. Just that level of concern from a law enforcement perspective. If you just weigh in on that, Ralph.
Well, what that does do, among other things, is that obviously it makes facial identification more difficult. Now, I've been following up on this since the photos came out. I heard a couple of people mention facial recognition. I do not think, based on my experience of facial recognition, which is significant, that facial recognition is going to be useful here. Now, there's no downside to trying it, right? You let the algorithms have their go at it. But based on the fact that the person's covered, that negates the distance between the ear and the nose, right? You can see the medial canthus on the inside of the eye,
Hmm.
but you can't see the helix or any other part of the ear, right? If the person has a Darwin's tubercle, it's covered up, right? So that's going to make facial recognition software usage much more difficult. Is it a slam dunk that it won't work? No, of course not. You're always going to try the software that you have. But to me, based on what I know about facial recognition software, this is not promising. Hopefully, I'm wrong and it'll work out with facial recognition software. But so much of the face that's measured by the algorithms is covered up. And all you really have is the eye, the iris, the pupil you see. Obviously take a crack at it,
Hmm.
let the software have its way with it. But I'm not optimistic as far as facial recognition software goes.
In a situation like this, Ralph, before the images were released to us within the hour or so, what's the first step in a case like this from the law enforcement perspective? Is it building a flow chart, or just walk us through, when you're trying to find persons of interest or
Right.
suspects in a situation like this?
Okay, well, the first thing I would do in that case is show the photo to everyone in the family. Does anybody know this guy, right? Is he your pool boy? Does Mrs. Guthrie know him from the adult recreation center? Does he mow your lawn? Is he the cashier at the local food mart, right? People are going to covet what's around them. Somebody knows that woman, right? Nobody flew in. I think we can agree that no one flew in from Philadelphia or Chicago to
Hmm.
kidnap her, right? Of course, anything's possible, but we don't think so. So somebody is going to covet her, that they see her every day. The cashier at the store, the pool boy, the sanitation guy, the UPS driver. There's somebody
Possible
in her world.
landscaper, possible
Right.
landscaper.
Somebody in her world is the person who did this. I would be very surprised if it wasn't. And so this is how you work it. You start out with the victim and you make concentric circles further out and out and out. And the perpetrator is going to be in there somewhere. You just have to keep pressing. But the photos are very, very useful because now you go back, right? You go back to the local food mart. You go back to the Guthrie family. Does anybody know this guy? Does anybody recognize him? How about the way he walks? How about his jacket? Okay, so you take those photos and you try to get into Miss Guthrie's world, and somebody in there is going to recognize this person. Hopefully.
Ralph, how much time do you have? We have to take a quick break. Can we come back to you? Can you stick with us for about 2 more minutes?
Yes, I can stick with you for a few
Okay,
minutes.
everybody, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue our conversation with retired NYPD Lieutenant Commander Ralph Cilento, and we're going to be following our breaking news story, images released in the person that police are trying to talk to in connection with the disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. A quick break, more Newsroom Live when we return. All right, everybody, 1:48 on your Tuesday, February the 10th. Retired Lieutenant Commander with the NYPD, Ralph Cilento, is standing by to continue our conversation about our top story. Vinny, if you would, the FBI, Tucson area authorities releasing images of the person that they are looking for in connection with the disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. And just to bring everybody up to speed, Ralph, so I can make sure for people who are joining us, whether it's on Fox Local or on our YouTube page, 2 weeks ago on January 31st, the mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie went missing. She was last seen on that Saturday evening. She did not show up for church the next day, and 2 weeks later, here we are. They are now releasing these images that we've been showing you of the person that they are looking for in connection with this case. Again, in the little box, you can see retired Lieutenant Commander Ralph Cilento of the NYPD is standing there. And Ralph, you were just talking about, you're bringing us up to speed from your experience and having investigated and covered things like this. And this is a question I'm just curious about. So if the suspect now knows that his images are out there, and like you said, they are privileged to somebody perhaps at the Key Food or at the grocery store out there. The Fry's is a grocery store I know in that area that's there. What is he doing? What does he do now? Just from your knowledge, from the interviews you've done with suspects, where is his mind right now?
Well, I mean, he's covered up. So what I think he's doing right now is I think he's laying low. I think he's probably in a house somewhere. If he goes out anywhere, it's going to be somewhere local to watch news. Uh, People that do this kind of thing, they want to see what others are talking about. So it's not uncommon for a perpetrator like this to go to like a local bar and sit there and have a beer just to listen to what's going on at the bar, what the chatter is. Okay. But he is worried about being recognized because you could see a good part of his body. So I think he's probably laying low at this point, somewhat comforted by the fact that he's covered. But then you know that you committed the crime. So everywhere that you walk around, you feel like there's eyes on you. Okay. So he's probably going to be laying low somewhere in his house or something.
So there is some ego involved in this. I know that in some cases, with homicide investigations, that there are things called trophies, if you will, that some suspects,
Right,
have near them or with them or something like that. But
right,
there is a degree of ego, someone who's just curious to see,
right.
how they're being viewed or discussed. Correct?
Yeah, which is why there's this inquiry, right? So he's probably watching TV right now, or he's probably watching the case on the internet, reading about it online. That's why I mentioned earlier that it's not uncommon that these guys will venture out and go to a bar,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just, order a cheeseburger and see what people are saying about it while it's on the TV in the bar. So there is a certain amount of danger and thrill involved. And they do want to assess, like, what are people saying about it? On the other hand, while there is psychology that says this, the truth of the matter is we just don't know. He could be holed up in his house and not come out at all. So this is all speculative based on
Right.
the history of homicide suspects and kidnapping suspects. It's not uncommon for them to venture out into a public place to see what's on television. Also he could be in his house laying low.
Ralph, let me ask you this in regards to this information and the how it's received by the family who have been, we can't even imagine what they've been going through since January
Right.
31st. Once you get this information, can you just talk to us from a law enforcement perspective? How do you approach the family with this? Are there a whole bunch of cautions? Just walk us through. I can only imagine how uncomfortable and difficult that conversation can be. But if you would just share with us how that tends to develop.
Right. Well, there's two things, right? One is this case has far progressed now. And as far as whether or not you would share photos with families, I could see early on that you may want to hold back, but not in a case like this. Because in a case like this, we just talked about whoever kidnapped Miss Guthrie knows her. That person is in her world somewhere, and her family is obviously in her world, and we covet what we see every day. And so the family lives close by, so we don't want to hold back these photos. We do want to talk to the family right away and say these are photos that are recovered. Everyone take a look at it. At this point, the initial shock, not that I'm marginalizing how much stress they're under, but at this point the initial shock to the family has come and gone. Now they are on board with trying to catch this person also. Like, being upset and overly emotional, that has run its course. I'm not saying they're not emotional.
Right.
I'm saying the original shock of your mother missing is now gone. Now they want to help catch the person also and ultimately have the return of the mother. Right. So I don't think there's any delay in showing the family these photos. I think the minute you get them, you're getting the family together. You're interviewing them one at a time. You get them together as in they're all in the same place, but you interview them separately in different rooms and get each person's take on whether or not they recognize this photo, because you don't want any bandwagon bias where one family member thinks they recognize the person,
Right.
the other person agrees just because we want to have peer acceptance. No, you want to separate the family members. You want to have them each individually view the photos and say, do you have an independent recollection or idea of who this person can be? So you don't want the collective view. You want individual opinion of each family member.
Mm-hmm.
And after they've all been interviewed separately about these photos, then you can interview them together. But initially, you want to get them all separated and interview each family member about whether or not they recognize who this person is.
One of the other things I want to ask you about also, certainly we've been having discussions here when you say get the family together to show them pictures, you also have to, and going back to your point, I see you nodding your head about that chart that you were just describing before we went to break. You also have to, everyone is considered a person of interest until they are ruled out. Is that correct? Meaning even within the
Correct.
family.
Correct.
I can't even imagine, but can you just talk to us from that perspective when you're interviewing, family members, but you also have to, I guess, make them aware or however it's done that we have to look at everybody. And
Right. Well, what happens is No one's ruled out until they're ruled out. Hurt feelings aside, being offended aside, it doesn't matter. Okay. We have a job, and that job is to find this lady and who's responsible for taking her. So if the family's not ruled out, then they're not ruled out. Right. But at this point, I don't think even showing a family member the photo, even if one of them is still a suspect, right? We're not saying they are, but
Right.
you're not ruled out until you're ruled out. I don't see how that harms the case right now. But what you would do is, I mean, what I would do is you show the photos and then you monitor the family's phones to see which calls go out right away, right? Because if one of the family members does know the person in the photo and they're going to try to tip them off after they view the photo, there's going to be phone calls that go out. So, I mean, this is sort of like inside baseball,
Hmm.
but I mean, really, everyone is in play until they're not.
No, we
And I
get it.
think the family has to understand that also.
No, we certainly know that, like you just to your point, that everyone is considered until they are not, and the point that you use, it may be uncomfortable, it may be difficult or upsetting, but it's just how
Right.
law enforcement carries out situations like this. Before you get away from us, Ralph, just want to ask you this one question there. Um, we know right now that this person is the suspect, or this individual in the images right now is probably the most wanted person, right now by law
Right.
enforcement. I just want to ask you about, just to stress the importance of law enforcement agencies working together to bring a successful resolution to this, or at least to bring Nancy Guthrie, return her to her family. You have to have the cooperation, of
Right.
multi agencies.
Right. I mean, that goes without saying, but since you asked me, I'm going to say it anyway. 100%, you're right, Antoine. 100%. There is absolutely no room for siloing or holding evidence back from one agency. I mean, really, a kidnapping is the responsibility of the local law, unless we have suspicion or we can prove that the victim crossed state lines. The other way that you get the FBI in is if you ask them to come in. Now, once you ask the FBI to come in, they have limitless resources and personnel. And why would you not take advantage of that? So I think we're all in agreement here. I haven't seen any indication whatsoever that the law enforcement agencies are siloing or being territorial. I think your best outcome is to get everybody involved, right? I think you should have Arizona DPS involved also, the
Right.
Arizona Department of
The
Public
public
Safety.
safety,
Let's
right.
get them involved on the highway. And number one now, because so much time has gone past, if they knew who this person was, they'd have him. So clearly they don't. And now we're going to rely on the public. You push this photo out hard, fast, and repeatedly. Somebody knows this person. Somebody's going to recognize that jacket, recognize those eyes, recognize the book bag, the way they walk, the gait, the movement. Somebody knows this person. Okay. And the public is going to turn this person in. I would be shocked if they haven't already. They just put those photos out. I guarantee you right now, I would bet even money that the tip lines are exploding right now. Somebody knows this person.
Retired Lieutenant Commander Ralph Cilento of the NYPD. Ralph, we thank you so much for being with us. Your extended interview, your insight, also for the years that you spent protecting us in the streets here in New York City. We thank you for that. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll return you to your day, Ralph Cilento. Thank you for that.